Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams, welcome to Eyeshadow Palette Month. This is my top 10 favorite brown toned eyeshadows. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. Today we're going to be doing another top 10 color series video, and today we're talking about brown tones. I've done a lot of different colors already this year. It's a video I like to do every month to tell you a little bit about some of my favorite shades for my singles as well as from palettes in a different color family. So I've done purples, I've done navies, I've done taupe, I believe I've done bright shades as well. Like I've done a couple of things here and there, and today we're talking browns. If you're unfamiliar with the channel, then hi, my name is Maaike. I live in the Netherlands. I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, which means makeups works just a little bit differently for me. I have been reviewing makeup for more than a decade. I love a good eyeshadow palette, Essence and Catrice, and getting the use out of my makeup. So if you're here for that, then I hope you'd like to consider subscribing by clicking subscribe down below. So yes, let's talk browns. That's the topic of today's video. And as much as I love taupe, I struggled finding browns in my collection. That said, I've got 12 options here for you today, because once I started going through palettes, I was like, oh yeah, I like this one, and I like this one, and I like this one. And then I had to swap some things out because I didn't want to like overflow this, this video idea with too many brown shadows, because when push comes to shove, when it comes to brown, I don't love it. And that's because a lot of browns we get in palettes are very often warm toned, and the things we get that are more cool toned tend to be really deep and these like chocolatey browns that I only like to use as liners. So that's why, you know, if you look at these shades and you go like, why are those your favorites? We never hear you talking about those. When I think of a brown, I think of eyeliner shades and maybe a lower lash line pop, but I don't tend to wear browns in my crease or all over the lid like I would do with a taupe. I would prefer a taupe over a brown any time of day. Even that, you know, that being said, of course, I'm known for loving my neutral looks. That's just what I like. Something like what I'm wearing today, like a more neutrally toned eye with a brighter lip, is my signature look. If you had, like, if you took away all of my makeup and I could only wear the same look for the rest of my life, I would opt for something like this rather than like a brighter, more colorful eye and a nude lip, because I just feel this works best on my complexion. Does that mean I don't like colorful eyeshadow? I still do. I wear blues and purples from time to time. I love a good green. But my go-to, especially because it's something I can do very quickly before I head out the door to work as well, is a neutral eye with a red lip. That's my go-to. If I had to give myself a signature look, it's this. Not gonna lie. So that's why I think that talking about brown eyeshadow was something we still had to do, and I hadn't done it yet. So these are my top 10 favorite shades. So in some of these videos, I've also included some of my my singles. So I have a couple of singles palettes, and I actually reorganized my entire singles collection earlier in the year, so I can link that in the description box down below in case you're interested. And when I did that, I actually decided to create 3 different neutral palettes. I did a matte palette, a like satin shimmer palette, and a more high shine metallic shimmer palette. And you're going to be seeing the matte and the high shine metallic one in a minute. But 3 of the shades I will be selecting as part of my favorite brown shades are going to come from the matte palette, because if I'm wearing eyeliner, it's going to be a matte. And one of the deepest things I have in my entire collection is actually in here. This is by Glaminatrix. I no longer know what this shade is actually called, but this is from the neutral palette that they launched last year. And I figured out that the pans in that palette were magnetic, so I took out the shades I liked best, because sadly the palette as a whole wasn't quite right for me. I think it was like their new neutrals or nearly natural. I think that's what the name was of the palette. And the darkest shade in the palette was this really, really stunning dark brown that I just love. And this kind of dark brown you're going to see coming by a few times, because if I think of brown eyeshadow, these dark, cool tone, chocolatey browns, as a liner, that's what I go for, that's what I use. So that's why this had to be featured here. Then this shade right here, this is Corduroy by Becca. And When I was going into this palette to look for browns that I could use, this one instantly caught my eye. And even though Corduroy by MAC is not a shade a lot of people talked about, it was always about soft brown or something like Wedge, which is one of these ones over here. And maybe Espresso I think they had as well. I have a couple of them here that are also by MAC that I like, but the one I've always worn the most is Corduroy. And if I'm thinking of a crease shade for like a brown, Corduroy has been my favorite. And the reason why I like Corduroy so much is because it's a very neutral brown. It's got a bit of warmth, but it also has a bit of a cooler undertone, and it just goes with my complexion so well, and it gives enough definition to the crease for me to really amp up any look, which is sometimes just all you need. So that's why I really enjoy Corduroy. But I also enjoy soft brown, and soft brown as a shade was one that I wanted to get from MAC for such a long time and just didn't. And I don't know why I held off so long. I think this is one of the last MAC eyeshadows I ever bought, and I haven't bought a MAC eyeshadow in like 5 years, I think. So these have been around for a while in my collection, but I like them. And soft brown, the minute I bought it, I understood the hype. If you get just one MAC eyeshadow, this, and maybe something like Woodwinked, if they still do it, can be really, really stunning. This is a perfect crease shade. I know there are a lot of people who love their matte looks who just use this all over, and it's a one and done shadow that can really just do an entire eye look with just one shade, and you're good to go. And soft brown is one of those looks, even though it is a little bit more on the warmer tone side. It's got a little bit of peach running through. It's like peachy yellow, but that's exactly why I enjoy it. And it is that lighter moment that I just really enjoy. One thing I struggled to find in my collection were good shimmering browns, but then I pulled out my more metallic-y high shine single palette with a bunch of neutrals in, and my eye was just caught by this shade here. It's by Glam Shop. It's called Always Cool, and finding cool tone brown shimmers, oh my word. It's always got a red undertone, and it looks more like a bronze, and it's got a lot of yellow running through it, pulling more towards the gold. But a good cool tone brown that isn't necessarily a taupe, this. It's a stunner of a shade. It's very unique in my collection because of that. It's incredibly high shine. I've mentioned a lot of times how much I love the Glam Shop shimmer formula, and I believe this isn't even one of their more special shimmers. This is just one of their standard shimmers, and it's already incredibly metallic. So shout out to Glam Shop for creating this shade because I think it's stunning. Speaking of a brown shimmer that is more warm tone that I like, is in one of my all-time favorite warm tone palettes. Yes, I do like warm tones, don't get me wrong. We all know I love the cool tones, but there's something about a spicy warm tone brown that definitely gets my heart aflutter sometimes. And it's from the Nabla Cutie Analog palette. This is one of my favorite all-time warm tone palettes. I've mentioned it many times in the past. It's got quite a lot of red, and it's not overly orange, which is with a lot of warm tones, it pulled very orange, and that can make me look a little bit sickly. But if it pulls towards the red tone spectrum, red tends to be a bit cooler tone than an orange usually, and that does work for my complexion. So if I'm gonna go warm toned, it's gonna be this. And especially that deep, dark, shimmering brown. So, so good. The reason why it works is that it has a bit of a reddish undertone in the matte brown shade that it has, but it's got a silvery purple sparkle running through it. So it's got a perfect blend of something warm toned, yet it's a brown, but it's got that plumminess to it, which is why it works and why I love it. Going into the mattes then, this is the Unearthly Cosmetics Fall Magic palette, which I really, really hope they bring back again this fall, because this is one of my favorite palettes by I keep calling them Alien Cosmetics. That's their old name. Unearthly Cosmetics. This is my favorite by them. It even says just unearthly on the palette, and it doesn't stick in my brain. Oh well. And I think they haven't had the name Alien Cosmetics for a while. But this shade here, it's brown, but it's got that hint of green, and I've mentioned so many times how I love a green tone taupe. but this is far more brown leaning. It doesn't have as much gray, and this palette as a whole, like it's got the spicy warm tones, and this is a bit more of a cooler tone together with this. This I do feel is more of like a taupe shimmer, but this is definitely more of a brown, but it's got that greener undertone, so it goes really well with this. It goes really well with this cool tone matte brown as well, but my favorite shade in this entire palette that makes the palette for me, because it's such a good crease shade for me, is this one. It's a bit more deeper than, like it's deeper than something like corduroy would be, so I only need a very light hand with it, but it definitely brings the entire palette together for me, which is why I had to get a shout out here. Going back in with a shimmer, I just recently reviewed this. This is the Autumn Closet by Etude. This is a K-Beauty palette, and the minute I started using this, I was like, yes, it's light, but it's got some really stunning shades, and I especially like this brown toned shimmer. It's again cooler toned. It could perhaps be a taupe. It's sort of like on that threshold, but I feel that this overall pulls more brown than it does taupe. So that's my saving grace here. These also have a bit of a green undertone, and then this just has this really light sort of silvery reflect to it, which I just love, but in its undertone, in its base color, I feel it's definitely a brown, and it looked so stunning all over the lid, so I just had to give it a shout out here. One of my all-time favorite browns is a shade I've actually owned twice, because I used to own the Modern Renaissance, but then I found out it's also in the Soft Glam, and it's the shade Cypress Umber by ABH, and it's this brown here. It's their darker brown, and I believe when I reorganized my ABH palettes, I put the Modern Renaissance in that reorganization video, and I think I actually kept Cypress Umber from the Modern Renaissance as well, so it's in one of my other palettes by now. But I love this brown. It's got warmth, but it also has a cooler undertone, so it's this really good neutral, smack in the middle, darker brown, but it's not, let me show you a bit of a comparison here. If I hold my, look at how much deeper the Glaminatrix is that I just recommended. So this is a really, really stunning, lighter brown, but very often I feel that this kind of depth, this level of depth, things get really sort of orangey and spicy. But this, you can just see compared to Mulberry, which is more of a berry shade, and something like Sienna and Rustic, which has a lot more warmth in it, that this is just so much more neutral, which is why I love it. And Cypress Umber, one of the best shades ever created. Sticking to the matte train for a minute there, the BH Cosmetics Love in London, I keep raving about this palette. I know it's discontinued, but this is one of the best ever drugstore eyeshadow palettes. I'm terribly sorry if you missed out. I love mine, and this one has one of the best browns on the planet. And it's this one right here. You can see how much I've used it, because the last time I went into this palette, I definitely gave it a bit of a, I definitely disrupted it a little bit there. It's the shade Crumpet. And it's again, like there's an entire row of browns and a black here. You can just see this is more red, this is more orange, and then this is that neutral brown that I just love. It goes really well with the shade Prestige here. It is a little bit too deep though. I wish it had a little bit more, like it had been dialed down just a little bit more muted. But you can very easily create this if you own this palette and you find these shades too deep. You get enough light shades in here that if you blend some of these deeper shades with some of this, you're going to get that perfect shade that you need. So I very often blend these two together to lighten Crumpet just a little bit to make it more, like, just make it more perfect for me as a crease shade. But yeah, Crumpet in the BH Cosmetics Love in London is another great brown tone. From something more affordable to something more expensive. Now, the palette I'm about to show you no longer has its original color story, and honestly, I don't know what palette this originally came from, but it is a Natascha Denona shade, and it's either from the My Dream, the Retro, the Glam, or the Retro Glam. My bets are on the Glam, but not entirely sure because I reorganized my color stories and it's this brown in the corner right here. This has a bit of shine. Ooh, sorry to blind you there, but it's a bit more reflective, but it's got like a subtle shine. It's more of a satin, and as I already mentioned, I struggle finding good shimmering browns that aren't too warm toned, and this is again that more neutrally leaning brown tone shimmer that has a lot of depth. This I love if you do like a barely there eye with something like a little bit shimmery on the matte, on the lid I should say, or if you go in with a full-on matte look and then using this as liner is stunning. But a shade like this, because it doesn't have too full of a metallic shimmer, can very easily be used in the outer V, on the lower lash line. It has a little bit more dimension because of the added shimmer in here, but it's not going to be overly shimmery and make you look like a disco ball. So shades like this, I feel, are just some of the most versatile on the planet, and they don't get enough hype. Next up, Catrice Fall in Colors. This is another really, really pretty palette that I have raved about so much in recent years. This is one of my all-time favorite palettes by Catrice. I'm not sure if you can still get it. It was a limited edition for the fall time last year. I very randomly picked it up from my local drugstore and fell in love. And it's got a couple of really stunning shades. It's not that brown though. It's more like plummy, taupey goodness, but it's got this shade here. This green, brown, olivey kind of shade. That's what I should call it. It's definitely more brown, but it's got that green undertone again that I love, but without it being like a true like taupe. There's nothing in here that's like a true taupe. It's quite gray. And then this is just such a nice juxtaposition. It goes really well with some of the spicier things that are going on, but it's neutral enough that you can pull it in with all the other shade, and it's another nice, deeper shimmer. I just like deeper browns than I do very light ones, because very often the light things are peachy or gold, and that's not my cup of tea, but this shade I do like. One of my favorite brown tone palettes on the planet. Can you still get this? The Urban Decay Naked Honey, which is currently the only Urban Decay palette still living in my makeup collection, because I decided to declutter all of my Urban Decay palettes last year because I wasn't actively using them anymore. Now, I still have all of them. They're sitting in a shoebox in my closet, but I don't use them anymore. A lot of them are very old. I'm not sure, but like the quality hasn't changed, but I just have newer things in my collection that I feel can give me a similar look. Save for this. And the Naked Honey is that warm tone palette of which I've said, like, give me warm tones like this any time of day. This just works on me. I also feel that yellow tone bronzers work for me quite well, and that's probably why these more yellowy tone browns work on me pretty well as a warm tone as well. My favorite shade in the palette is the shade Queen, which is this, again, more green toned leaning sort of shimmering shade. It's one of the deepest shades we get in here, but I always feel that putting this all over the lid and then one of these more yellow tones can just give you the best look ever. I mean, the yellows in here aren't that special, actually. Like, you can just see how monochromatic it is if you cover those up. But I've always appreciated how this doesn't go too deep, and you do get all of the shades of like a mustard yellowy brown that you could possibly want, but this is definitely the standout shade for me in this one. Another palette that I'm not entirely sure you can still get, but the Fawn from Michel Cosmetics. I haven't heard from this brand in over a year. They used to have a website that looked a little bit dodgy because it had a lot of spelling errors, so I think that held people back as well. And the Instagram hasn't been active in a while, so I'm not sure if you can still get this. But the Fawn is another neutral palette that I have just adored ever since I bought it. And in here, we get a lot of browns. Look at the amount of browns. So stunning. We get a lot of warmth over here, but it's, of course, it's going to be these two, and especially this deeper shimmer. Again, like the Natascha Denona, it has that sort of satiny vibe that you can just play around with it a lot. This is the more matte version, but I think I like this a little bit better because it has that depth. And this is one of the best taupe shimmers on the planet. This water reflections, that's what it's called. And this is just really, really shiny and super metallic, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the browns. And this, together with that, is a match made in heaven. Great, really stunning for a halo eye actually. So this is the shade Nocturnal Night, and this has a reddish undertone. It's a bit, I think in terms of shade, it's going to be the most similar to the Nabla Cutie Analog. But a replacement for the Michalu Cosmetics has been my Gloss Gods New Neutrals. I've been raving about this one. I've put it in my giveaway that I'm hosting this month, so in case you didn't know, go back to my announcement video that went online just before I started doing Eyeshadow Palette Month, where I announced the giveaway, and I'm giving away this one to one lucky winner this year. So if you want to win one of my favorite neutral palettes that have come out in recent years, definitely try this one and enter the giveaway. And this it's brown heaven. It's a lot of brown, but the shade I wanted to talk about here is actually, again, going to be a shimmer shade. It's this one. And this shade has a couple of, again, more green tone shimmer. So you have this multi-chrome here, which you can see in the mirror pools green. And this has that as well, where if the light catches it, it has this brown, purple to green sort of shift to it, but it's subtle. It's not like a multi-chrome where it's like, oh, you know, but it's subtle. And this entire bottom row is a little bit more green leaning. This row is more warm toned and this row is more neutral. So this is very much, if you want your neutrals and you want different undertones and you want different textures, then this is definitely the palette. And this is one of the more special shades in this palette as well. So I couldn't leave it out from the selection here today. And finally, last but not least, the M Cosmetics Divine Skies in Rhoda is another brown tone palette. And I don't own that many like all brown palettes anymore. Like I have the ones I like and that's what I've stuck to. But I really like this. And this is like a bronze, and I'm not a bronze person at all. But this bronze brown is like the best warm tone bronze brown I currently have in my makeup collection. Really, really nice. Overall, this is a very neutral brown palette, which again, I struggle to find because everything has been so warm toned for years, but this is really lovely and I do really enjoy that shimmering bronze shade. And I felt that if we're talking about brown, we need to talk about a bronze as well, and that's the only bronze shade I have that I really feel I can recommend because I'm not a big fan of bronze. So those were the 12 brown eyeshadow palettes that I think are the best ones that I personally have in my makeup collection. Let me know in a comment down below what your favorite brown toned eyeshadows are. I would love to know. And if you would like to stay tuned for more, then of course I will be coming to you with more eyeshadow related content here in Eyeshadow Palette Month. I have extra videos going live this week. We're gonna finish things off on a high note with my eyeshadow palette collection. In short, I have a lot in store for you. So if you'd like to consider subscribing, then thumbs up this video if you liked it, and I hope to see you again in my next video. See you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.